Hey guys, Nicky Skevich back for week 5 here with Daily Fantasy Winners. And for this week, I'm going to give a play out that I like at each position, specifically for tournaments or GPPs, if you will. These are just guys I think that have a really good upside coming into this week and just won't be that highly owned. We're looking for just some guys that, aren't going to be the straight up chalk, so to speak. So in any case, moving on. So we're going to do quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense. So we will cover those 5. Okay, so let's do this. The first position is quarterback. So it's funny, I just said, we're talking about tournaments here, but I actually like Aaron Rodgers here. I know he's clearly going to have the highest projected points for quarterbacks this week. As far as the Sunday slate goes, we're just talking about the Sunday slate here, by the way. So, Tom Brady's obviously up there as well, of course, when we're including the Thursday slate. But this is just for Sunday slate only for the purposes of this. But if you take a look at the pricing right now on both DraftKings and FanDuel, Aaron Rodgers is significantly more expensive than all the other quarterbacks. Rodgers is $9,500 on FanDuel, $8,100 on DraftKings. That's pretty expensive, obviously. So I think that's obviously going to keep his ownership down some. And there are plenty of other good quarterbacks to choose from that are, priced $1,000 or $2,000 less than him. So if you do take a look at Green Bay here, we'll pull up some of the NFL stats here that I have been compiling, and we'll take a look at Green Bay here, and I'll explain what each column is here when it deems necessary. But if you take a look at Green Bay here right now, this is just their offensive rush percentage and offensive pass percentage, and then the same thing for defense here. But in any case, Green Bay right now, they are throwing it the third most this year. That's no surprise. Like, that's kind of been a common thing for Green Bay lately, as they've had like all their offensive line troubles, mainly due to injuries, because they always seem to be injured on the offensive line. But now the injuries this year certainly apply to the running backs, especially coming into this week, because they got beat up on Thursday night. Ty Montgomery has the broken ribs, who is, he's questionable at least, obviously, to play this weekend. Jamal Williams, I guess, practiced in full now all of a sudden, but, who knows if he's going to be 100%. But in any case, I just have no reason to believe that Green Bay's all of a sudden going to run on Dallas. I would think that they're going to try to, throw it as much as they normally do and use Aaron Rodgers, in all his strengths, of course. And so, obviously, Dallas's defense isn't very good. And Green Bay's yards per rush attempt, I'll just show that to you very quickly. Green Bay right now, they are 25th in offensive yards per rush attempt. So right here specifically, they're only averaging 3.5 yards per rush. So that's not very good, obviously. Their passing's actually not been that good either. They're only averaging 6.5 yards per pass attempt, which is good for 19th in the league. But, at the same time, like, that's going to get better, and I definitely expect that to get better. And Green Bay's actually played some pretty good teams here so far to open the season, or at least in the first couple of weeks, with like the Seahawks and the Falcons and like that. So, but in any case, and they obviously, Green Bay's had some injuries to deal with too. They lost Jordy against the Falcons, and Cobb got injured as well. So, but in any case, I do like Aaron Rodgers this week. Again, probably won't have as high of ownership as some people think, and so he will be a good play. Okay, anyways, moving on to running back. I've got Lamar Miller, and I know this is the Sunday night game, so this really doesn't apply to the DraftKings people because we're talking about the Sunday main slate here, so sorry about that. But he is one player I think that actually will still have pretty low ownership here on FanDuel, being at 6,500. So the one thing I've found fascinating about Houston here over the last couple of years is they've been a team that's wanted to run the ball a lot, but they really haven't been able to do it very effectively, mainly because their offensive line has been pretty darn poor, and their quarterback play has been pretty darn poor. And now all of a sudden, I do think their offensive line has actually played better here over the last couple weeks. But with the elevated performance of Deshaun Watson, and combine that with the running ability he has, Houston's been much better running the ball. They are 14th in yards per rush attempt. But you look at that and like, wait, that's average. Like, why is that good? The first 2 weeks, they were flat out atrocious. They were dead last after they played Jacksonville, when, obviously Tom Savage started and then Watson came in, and it still wasn't very good even when Watson came in that first game. They had the very short turnaround for the road game at the Cincinnati Bengals, which they gutted out and won in a defensive battle or sloppy game, whatever you want to call it. But, the only really good running play that Houston had that entire game was the Deshaun Watson long run for a touchdown. And so nothing was working for Houston's running in the first 2 weeks. It has been significantly better here over the last couple of weeks. And in this matchup against Kansas City's fascinating to me because a lot of people think Kansas City has been the best team through 4 weeks because they're 4-0. And to be fair, they have been the best team through 4 weeks. And actually, if you take a look at Kansas City here, I'll show you. This is yards per play differential, offense and defense combined. Kansas City has been the best in the league. Every play that they run, they're outgaining their opponents by 1.3 yards per play if you combine offense and defense together, which is very good. So they've been the best, combining both offense and defense. But if you split it up and look at offense and defense here, if you look at Kansas City here on the far left, they are doing pretty much all the work is coming from the offense right now. They are killing it on offense, averaging 6.8 yards per play, which is the best in the NFL, killing it both in the running game and the passing game. It's funny. I have been kind of someone that's always been like, it's like the Chiefs, conservative offense and everything like that for the last couple of years. But I will admit it, like seeing what the Chiefs are doing with some of these option concepts and the way they're doing these certain fakes and counters and things like that, it's really fun to watch. And they seem to get Andy Reid has been a lot more creative with some of the play calling and utilizing both Travis Kelce and Kareem Hunt in certain ways and Tyreek Hill a little bit. Like it's been really fun to watch. So it's very well deserved. But getting back to their defense here, if you take a look at Kansas City's defense, they've actually been pretty poor defensively. 23rd in yards per play allowed and 23rd in yards per rush attempt allowed. So where they've made up for this defensively is that if you take a look at turnovers and yards per point, in turnovers here in the orange right here, Kansas City, they're 4th in turnover margin, partially because they don't turn the ball over, but they're also forcing turnovers. It's both things. But if you take a look at yards per point differential, they're 3rd in the NFL. Yards per point, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a regression metric a little bit. Usually when you like Phil Steele is somebody that kind of started talking about this when he was doing his magazine, and other people do this too. But it's one of those things where you can look for signs if like your offense is gaining a lot of yards, but they're not scoring many points. That's usually a sign of being unlucky. Or if they're gaining few yards, but they're scoring a lot of points, that's usually a sign that like you've been pretty lucky, probably by like field position and things like that. And the same thing works conversely, or in the exact opposite way, vice versa, defensively. And so, so basically, this here in the pink takes the average of the offense and the defense together. And Kansas City's ranked 3rd, which means they've been pretty fortunate. Now there's a couple things that mean that Kansas City is going to be better than the mean on that because they are a good kind of bend, don't break defense, and they played some good teams. So, we should just expect, every team should be exactly 16th or 17th in the NFL. But being 3rd is running kind of hot right now. And the way Kansas City's done this at a couple points here so far this season has been a little bit on the fortunate side. But so I just say this more on the defensive side rather than the offensive side, because the offense has just been absolutely fantastic. So I bring this back all the way into Lamar Miller, is that this is just a good matchup for Lamar Miller. I actually think this week he's getting 70% of snaps. He got 19 carries last week for like 80-some yards, got a touchdown. Would not surprise me if he had the same kind of workload, maybe get a couple touchdowns this week as well. And so you combine all that up, I think it's a pretty good play. Okay, so moving on to the San Francisco 49ers at wide receiver, actually. This is for Pierre Garçon. And so the San Francisco 49ers I don't really have anything actually statistically, I don't think, here to show you, other than that just Indy's pass defense here is really, the Indy's just defense is not really good here. They are 30th in yards per play allowed, and we all know Indy's defense is pretty bad. But in any case, taking a look at this, though, San Francisco, they have, if you take a look at their wide receivers, Pierre Garçon is by far the best weapon that San Francisco has to throw to. Garçon has absolutely dominated as far as the targets go. He has 33 this year. The next person on the team is Carlos Hyde, actually, who has 22. And then you get Marquise Goodwin at 19, and then, the rest of the other guys. So Garçon is dominating the targets as far as the wide receivers go. He just hasn't caught a touchdown yet. That's really the only reason why he hasn't had like a big game yet. And so really this is just kind of a perfect spot for a big game. He's not priced like really cheaply. He's just kind of priced, in the middle of the road with like Larry Fitzgerald, Golden Tate. And I think a lot more people will gravitate to those guys just because they've done a little bit more and they have a little bit more of a proven track record in their current scenario, I guess, if you will. And because Garçon's on a new team and people still think San Francisco is pretty bad. But I actually think San Francisco here, with Garçon here, is in a nice spot here going up against a Colts defense that's obviously pretty bad. So a nice spot for Pierre Garçon. So moving on to tight end. Tight end's kind of a tough spot, especially this year, to kind of find under the radar guys a little bit, just because it's easier to do that more when like all the top tight ends are healthy, and when you have guys like Greg Olsen and Tyler Eifert injured, and Hunter Henry's like makes as far as the offensive production he's doing and the way the Chargers are going on offense, just really bizarre and how that's worked out for Hunter Henry so far. It's just kind of hard to really find that under the radar guy, but. If there is somebody that's, I think, just going to be kind of lower owned in general, and because I mentioned Aaron Rodgers later, I think Martellus Bennett's got a nice spot here this week. For all it's for all the stuff I mentioned about Green Bay's passing attack here so far. But if you actually take a look at the targets, Martellus Bennett is tied with Devontae Adams for the most targets on the team so far this year. That's a little bit skewed because Jordy missed a little bit of time, and I think it was Cobb that missed a tiny bit of time as well, I believe, as well in that Atlanta game, if I'm not mistaken. I know Devontae Adams got, leveled a little bit there in that, or he took that horrendous shot to the head, obviously, in the Thursday night game against Chicago, but and he's right there as well. But so maybe it's like slightly skewed that he wouldn't have the most, but he's obviously right there essentially. He's getting a ton of looks right now. He's just somebody that has not caught a touchdown yet. He's priced very affordably. He's $5,300 on FanDuel, $4,100 on DraftKings. I don't think a ton of people are going to use him. But again, like I said, the targets are there, the opportunities are there. This is a great opportunity for him to have that good game. A couple touchdowns would not surprise me. He's got that, there is that potential there. I would think so. In any case, the last thing is for the defense. When I first saw this defense, I thought like, oh, this won't be that under the radar. But the more I looked at it, I actually think it will be. And I'll tell you why here in a second. But the defense I'm choosing here is the Cincinnati Bengals. So with Cincinnati, they're $4,500 on FanDuel, affordable, $3,300 on DraftKings. That's actually the fourth most expensive defense. So, and DraftKings usually does a good job pricing their defenses as far as like who's the best to worst, and they usually do a pretty good job of that. So that's kind of a nice little indicator as well. If you take a look at this matchup though with the Bengals and the Bills, and I'll do it from a yards per play perspective to start off. So we're taking a look at Buffalo here and Cincinnati here. If you just take a look at this, if you take a look at their teams in yards per play, both offensively and defensively, they are strikingly extremely similar. They're nearly the same in every category here as you go through. And so that extends all the way through here. But where you're going to find the difference is the Buffalo Bills are number 1 in yards per point differential and number 2 in turnover differential, while the Bengals are 22nd in yards per point differential and 31st in turnover differential. So the Buffalo Bills are 3-1, and the Cincinnati Bengals are 1-3. And the Bills have won the close games, the Bengals have lost the close games, and that's where that comes in. And this is why you see that you're wondering, how is this line Bengals -3? Well, that's why the line is Bengals -3. The sportsbook guys or the sportsbook odds makers out there, they think these teams are essentially very similar right now. They think Cincinnati's a little bit better than their record says, and Buffalo's not as good as their record says. So that's as far as they're just kind of looking at that from that standpoint. But taking a look here now at the defense here, Cincinnati's defense has actually been pretty darn good here through 4 weeks. Taking a look here, Cincinnati yards per play defensively, they are number 3. It's a little bit worse against the run, a little bit better against the pass. Now that's partially because Cincinnati has played some pretty bad offenses so far. They played Cleveland, they played Baltimore, they played Houston on the Thursday night game. So, and Houston was still kind of getting used to, they were on a short week coming out of that disaster against Jacksonville. And they were still, actually, I should also mention, Houston was still coming out of the hurricane situation. We can't forget that, of course, as well, unfortunately. And so there's probably a little bit of, things were a little bit discombobulated, especially then, obviously. In any case, but Cincinnati's defense, I thought, also played pretty well against Green Bay. Cincinnati almost went into Lambeau and won that game, and part of it was offense, but part of it certainly was defense as well. Green Bay really didn't move the ball well until later on in that game, and so, and then it says in the points as well. This is just points per game defensively right here. Cincinnati is 3rd in defensively, only giving up 16.8 points per game. So this is a Buffalo offense that really just hasn't been moving the ball very well. Buffalo 27th in yards per play. They haven't been very good against the run. They've actually passed the ball pretty effectively when they've chosen to, believe it or not, in terms of yards per pass attempt allowed. But the catch to all this is kind of Buffalo, guess what? They are number 1 in run percentage. They are very stubborn in getting LaShawn McCoy involved, and there's a reason why LaShawn McCoy is getting a lot of targets out of the backfield. The wide receivers are still very much a big concern in Buffalo. And so kind of tying all this in together a little bit also, Cincinnati is at home. Cincinnati has generated the fourth most sacks this year with 12 a game. Buffalo has allowed 11 sacks a game, which is 11th in the NFL. Or excuse me, it's 9th in the NFL. And so Buffalo is allowing the 9th most sacks. Cincinnati is forcing the 4th most sacks. Cincinnati's at home. Buffalo's struggling to move the ball. They're not as good as their record says. And this is just a kind of a thing. And the last thing because I mentioned that for why I don't think they're going to be owned as highly as people think. This is kind of a funny thing, but I looked at ESPN and Yahoo just, before I started this video or a little bit before that. Right now, the Cincinnati Bengals defense on Yahoo is owned in less than half the leagues, and in ESPN it's a little bit over half. And you can also tell, how much has this, player or defense been added or dropped, recently. The Bengals defense has been dropped by a lot of people from last week when they played the Browns, which obviously made sense. A lot of people were going to use them. They've been dropped by a lot of people. It was like 12.7% of people had dropped them on ESPN coming into this week. And so that was really interesting because the Bengals defense had a good week last week, and they're going at home against the Bills. And so a lot of people are like, I know we're talking about more about public players and hardly the sharps by any means, but there seems like there's a chunk of people out there that just don't think the Bengals are very good, and that applies to the defense. So I actually don't think their ownership is going to be that high. FantasyLabs says 9 to 12%, I believe, with FanDuel, because they're 4,500, and only like 2 to 4% on DraftKings. It'll probably be somewhere between those two, I think, on both sites. It'll be in the single digits, certainly. I think maybe around like 5-6%. So that would be my guess. A lot of people gravitate toward Pittsburgh and some of the other defenses. And so, anyways, that is it. Hopefully, I didn't talk too fast. Got a little rambly there, but in any case, thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please remember to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then I'm at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter, and DailyFantasyWinners is on Twitter at DFantasyWinners. All right, good luck this week, everyone.